Your sister is successful and responsible unlike you. My father Marcus declared during our weekly family barbecue, pointing his burger toward Sophia. She doesn't need help from anyone. I sat there on the wooden deck of our family home in Austin, Texas, watching the smoke rise from the grill. The summer heat made everything shimmer as Sophia flashed her perfect white teeth. She wore her expensive sundress like armor, every detail screaming wealth. Everything about her looked flawless. Sophia built her yoga studio empire through pure dedication. Unlike your silly art projects, Marcus continued, flipping steaks with aggressive pride. Look at her studio, her luxury car, her designer clothes. She's totally independent. I quietly sipped my lemonade, keeping my face blank. 3 years of these family cookouts had taught me to stay quiet while Marcus celebrated Sophia's amazing business and treated my art like child's play. She's making serious money with wellness coaching, he went on. Not like Emma sitting in her room drawing pictures all day. Sophia glowed at his words. Thanks, Dad. I've worked super hard to build my brand. It feels incredible to be completely self-made. I almost spit out my drink. Self-made. The woman who had called me crying for $4,000 just yesterday for her studio rent. Perfect, I said softly, setting down my glass. Then she won't need my monthly help anymore. The words floated across the deck like smoke from burnt meat. Sophia's bright smile melted away instantly, replaced by pure terror. Marcus stopped flipping steaks, his spatula frozen in midair.
What did you say?
He asked slowly. I said Sophia won't need my monthly payments anymore since she's so successful and independent. I kept my voice steady, watching my sister's tan face turn pale. Sophia's mouth moved, but no sound came out. She had spent 3 years pretending to be a wellness guru, while secretly depending on my art sales. Now her fake success story was falling apart with just one sentence. Emma, we promised to keep that between us, Sophia whispered desperately, her voice shaking. Keep what between us? Marcus demanded, looking back and forth with growing panic. The deck felt electric with tension. I could see Sophia thinking about how much she would lose if everyone knew the truth. Her whole identity as the successful daughter was about to break. This was the moment I had been waiting for without knowing it. 3 years of being ignored, 3 years of watching Sophia take praise for a lifestyle I was paying for, 3 years of Marcus constantly putting down my artwork. The favorite child was about to fall, and I was holding the key. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been creating digital art commissions from my cozy studio apartment in downtown Austin. While my family thinks I'm a starving artist who wastes time on computers, I've quietly built a massive client base creating custom artwork for businesses, book covers, and private collectors. My art business, which I call Dreamscape Designs, started as a hobby, but has grown beyond anything I imagined. I create digital paintings, logo designs, and illustrations for clients around the world through online platforms and direct contracts. Last year alone, I earned $680,000 from my artwork. My profit margins are excellent, and my clients always come back for more projects. The funny thing is that while Marcus dismisses my computer art, I make more in a month than most doctors see in a year. But I've always kept my success private. I dress casually, drive my old Toyota, and live simply. Money has never been about showing off for me. Sophia, however, has always been about the spotlight. At 25, she teaches yoga classes at a small studio downtown, earning around $35,000 yearly. It's honest work, but nothing like the wellness empire Marcus thinks she runs. 3 years ago, Sophia came to me sobbing. She had gotten into huge debt trying to look successful on social media. The fancy studio space she rented was draining her bank account. Her car payments were crushing her, and she was drowning in credit card bills from trying to look rich online. I'll pay you back soon, I swear, she had cried. I just need help until my business grows. I can't let Dad know I'm broke. Being the big sister, I wanted to help. I agreed to send her $4,000 every month to cover her bills with the promise that it would be short-term. Sophia said she would use the time to really build her yoga business and become truly independent. Instead, she used my money to create an even bigger fake lifestyle. She moved to an expensive apartment, bought designer workout clothes, and started posting videos about her successful wellness business. She convinced our whole family that she was a thriving entrepreneur while hiding where her money really came from. Meanwhile, Marcus kept comparing us at every family event. He would praise Sophia's business skills and treat my art like a silly hobby. He truly believed that Sophia's yoga teaching was more important than my thriving digital art business. Emma needs to get serious about her future, he would tell relatives. Sophia is the smart one. She's building something real. The worst part was watching Sophia nod along, never once admitting that her entire lifestyle came from the sister Marcus constantly criticized. She had gotten comfortable with the lie, comfortable with letting me fund her image while taking all the credit. Tonight's barbecue was supposed to celebrate Sophia's latest fake milestone. Instead, it was about to become the night when everything came crashing down. The silence stretched like taffy in the Texas heat, probably lasting only 20 seconds but feeling like forever. Marcus put down his spatula and stared at me with a look he saved for my biggest disappointments. "Emma, explain what you mean by monthly payments," he said carefully. Sophia shot me a look full of fear across the picnic table. "Dad, it's not what you think," she started, but her voice was weak. $4,000, I said clearly, every single month for 3 years. $144,000 total to pay for Sophia's apartment, car, credit cards, and yoga studio rent. Marcus's face went through a rainbow of emotions, from confusion to shock to something like rage. "That's crazy. Sophia makes great money from her wellness business. She makes $35,000 a year teaching yoga classes," I said simply. "Which is perfectly fine work, but nowhere near enough to support the lifestyle she's been showing off." "Emma, please don't do this," Sophia begged, tears starting to fall. But I was done covering for her lies. Her fancy apartment costs $3,200 a month. Her car payment is $750. Add in utilities, insurance, studio rent, and daily expenses, and she's been short about $4,000 monthly to keep up the act Dad has been cheering for. Marcus looked at Sophia like she was a stranger. "Is this real?" Sophia's perfect makeup was starting to smudge as tears rolled down her cheeks. I was planning to pay her back. I just needed time to grow my brand. "Grow what brand?" Marcus exploded. "You told me you had 500 private clients last month." "I teach group classes to maybe 20 people," Sophia admitted quietly. "I don't have private clients." The truth was finally coming out. For 3 years, Sophia had been making up stories about her yoga empire, creating fake client numbers and income reports that existed only in her imagination and Marcus's proud stories to friends. "So while I've been telling everyone how successful you are, how independent you are, you've been living off your sister's charity." Marcus's voice was getting louder. "It wasn't charity," Sophia said weakly. "It was a loan. A loan with no payment plan, no interest, and no end date," I corrected. "A loan you never mentioned when you were letting Dad use me as an example of what not to do with your life." Marcus turned to me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't his usual disappointment or dismissive look. It was something like embarrassment. "How much money do you actually make with your art stuff?" he asked quietly. I had never planned to share this information, but the moment felt right. Last year, I made $680,000 through my digital art business. After business expenses and taxes, I kept about $350,000. The number hit Marcus like a punch. He stumbled backward, staring at me like I had just grown wings. Sophia was crying hard now, understanding that her secret was completely out and her image as the successful daughter was totally destroyed. Marcus's beer bottle slipped from his hand and crashed onto the deck. The glass scattered across the wooden boards as he tried to process what I had just told him. $680,000, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "That's my gross income," I explained. "My net profit was around $350,000, but yes." Sophia was breathing too fast at the other end of the table. "Emma, you can't stop helping me now. My studio rent is due tomorrow. I have credit cards, car payments, my phone bill, my gym membership. Maybe you should have thought about that before spending 3 years letting Dad think you were more successful than me," I replied calmly, pulling out my phone. I'm stopping the automatic transfer right now. My fingers moved across the banking app quickly. With a few taps, I canceled the recurring $4,000 monthly transfer that had been funding Sophia's fake lifestyle. Done, I said, showing her the screen. Transfer canceled. Marcus was staring at me like I had just revealed I was an alien. You make more in a year than I made as a construction foreman in 8 years, and you've been sitting here letting me lecture you about being responsible. You never asked about my income, I pointed out. You just assumed that because I work on a computer, I must be failing. Sophia suddenly jumped up, her chair falling backward onto the deck. Dad, you have to make her keep helping me. I'll lose everything. Sit down, Sophia, Marcus said sharply, his voice cutting through her panic. You've been lying to me for 3 years. I wasn't really lying, she protested. I was just making things sound better. Making things sound better? Marcus's voice was full of disgust. You told me last week that you signed a deal with a major wellness company. Sophia's face collapsed. I knew you'd be upset if you found out I was struggling. So instead, you let me think Emma was the family failure while she was literally funding your entire life. Marcus stood up, his chair joining the chaos. Do you know how many times I've told people that Emma needs to grow up? How many times I've used Sophia as an example of what Emma should try to be? The irony was almost laughable. While Marcus was holding up Sophia as the perfect daughter, she had been completely dependent on my financial support. Every designer outfit he praised, every luxury he celebrated, every achievement he bragged about had been bought with money from my supposedly worthless art career. Emma, I'm begging you to reconsider, Sophia pleaded, walking around the table toward me. I'll pay you back with extra money. I'll get another job. I'll do anything you ask. What I want, I said, standing up to face her, is for you to stop pretending to be someone you're not. What I want is for Dad to stop using you as proof that I'm wasting my life. What I want is honesty. Sophia's perfect image was crumbling. Her expensive makeup was running down her face, and her designer dress was wrinkled from panic. For the first time in years, she looked like what she actually was, a 25-year-old yoga instructor living way beyond her means. But Dad thinks I'm successful, she whispered desperately. Dad thought you were successful, I corrected. Now he knows the truth. Marcus was walking back and forth across the deck, pulling at his graying hair. 3 years, he muttered. 3 years of bragging about Sophia's wellness empire while treating Emma's business like a joke. It's not a joke when it pays better than most lawyers, I said quietly. He stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been pride. What exactly do you create? Digital art, I replied. Custom paintings, business logos, book covers, character designs. I work with clients from around the world through online platforms and direct contracts. My customer base is mainly businesses and authors who need high-quality artwork and reliable service. Marcus blinked slowly. And this brings in almost $700,000 per year. Some years more, some years less, but consistently profitable. Yes. Sophia was still crying, but now her tears had changed. These weren't tears of panic about being caught. These were tears of real sadness for the lifestyle she was about to lose. I need details about your art business, Marcus said, sitting back down with new focus. I want to understand exactly what I've been dismissing all these years. Sophia looked between us with growing fear. She was realizing that Marcus's attention had completely shifted away from her crisis and toward understanding my success. I started Dreamscape Designs 5 years ago, I began. I noticed that many small businesses couldn't afford high-quality custom artwork from traditional agencies. Most graphic design is either cheap template stuff that looks generic or expensive agency work priced for big corporations. Marcus leaned forward, actually paying attention to me for maybe the first time in my adult life. So I learned advanced digital art techniques, built relationships with clients who needed custom work, and created a reputation for delivering exactly what people envisioned at reasonable prices. And people actually pay good money for digital art? Marcus asked. Dad, creative services are a huge industry, I explained. Companies spend millions of dollars on branding, marketing materials, and custom artwork. The problem is that most agencies focus on huge clients or simple template work. I target small and medium businesses who want professional custom art but can't afford agency prices. Sophia was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to figure out how quickly her world was going to fall apart. My average project value is around $850, I continued. I complete roughly 700 projects per year across all my platforms. My profit margin runs about 55% after software costs and business expenses. Marcus was doing calculations in his head. 700 projects times $850 is $595,000 yearly, I finished. But that was last year's numbers. Some years I do better with bigger contracts. The scale of my business was finally hitting him. Marcus had spent years treating me like a kid playing with coloring books when I was actually running a six-figure creative business. "Where do you actually work?" he asked. "My apartment has a professional art studio, but most client communication happens online. I handle project planning, client relationships, marketing, invoicing, and creative work. The actual art creation happens in my digital studio." Sophia suddenly looked up from her phone with terror in her eyes. "Emma, my credit card minimum payments alone are $2,100 per month. Without your transfers, I can't even make the minimums. Maybe you shouldn't have bought so many designer yoga outfits," I suggested. "Or maybe you should have been honest about your situation instead of building a lie that needed constant financial support." "But what am I going to tell people?" Sophia cried. "Everyone thinks I'm this successful wellness entrepreneur." "Tell them the truth," Marcus said harshly. "Tell them you've been living a life funded by the sister you and I both treated like a failure." The complete reversal was clear. Marcus's entire understanding of his daughters had been turned upside down, and he was struggling to deal with his mistakes. Every conversation we had ever had about my career was being rewritten. Every time he had criticized my art choices, every time he had held up Sophia as an example, every time he had suggested I get a real job was now shown to be wrong and hurtful. "I need to call your Uncle David," Marcus said suddenly.
"Why?"
Sophia asked with dread. "Because last week I told him that Emma should follow Sophia's example and start a traditional business. I told him that Sophia's wellness studio was proof that real businesses were more stable than freelance work. My Uncle David, Marcus's brother, was a successful restaurant owner who had always been curious about my art career. He had probably stayed quiet when Marcus made those comments, but he must have known how wrong his perspective was." Sophia was spiraling into complete panic mode. She had pulled out her calculator app and was desperately searching for apartments she could actually afford on her yoga instructor salary. "Look at this," she said, showing us a tiny apartment listing. 400 square feet for $1,800 a month, and it doesn't even have a proper kitchen. "Welcome to living within your actual means," I replied without sympathy. Marcus was still processing the business details. "Emma, when you said you work on art, I pictured you doodling in a coloring book. I never imagined you were running a real business." "That's because you never asked," I pointed out. "Every time I tried to explain what I do, you would interrupt with advice about getting a normal job." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I thought I was helping. I thought I was encouraging you to be more like Sophia." "More like Sophia," I repeated. "You mean more like someone who lies about their income, lives entirely on debt, and depends on family money while pretending to be self-made?" Sophia slammed her phone down. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Emma. I was just trying to make Dad proud. By using me as the family disappointment while living off my success," I shot back. The anger I had been holding back for 3 years was finally coming out. "Do you know how many family barbecues I've sat through listening to speeches about responsibility and work ethic while funding your entire fake lifestyle?" Marcus stood up suddenly and walked to the deck railing overlooking our backyard. "I owe you a huge apology, Emma. A massive apology." "It's not just about apologizing," I said. "It's about recognizing that your ideas about success and failure were completely backwards. Sophia's yoga instructor title impressed you more than my actual financial achievement. But her job seemed more," he paused, looking for the right word. "More legitimate," I suggested. "More normal, more like what you understand." He nodded reluctantly. "That's exactly the problem, Dad. You value the appearance of success over real success. Sophia had a business-sounding title and posted about wellness, so you assumed she was thriving. I work from home in comfortable clothes, so you assumed I was failing. Sophia was crying again, but this time the tears seemed more real. I never wanted it to get this bad. I thought I would grow my yoga business or find better paying work and eventually stop needing your help. For 3 years? I asked skeptically. I kept thinking next month would be different or next year. I kept hoping something would change. The only thing that changed was your spending, I pointed out. Instead of using my support to get stable, you used it to justify spending even more. Marcus returned to the table and sat down heavily. What happens now? Now Sophia figures out how to live on her actual salary, I said. And maybe both of you stop treating my career like a fun hobby that I'll eventually give up. And what about the money Sophia owes you? Marcus asked. I had been thinking about this question for months. I consider it an expensive education. I'm not expecting repayment, but I'm also not providing any more financial support. Sophia looked up with hope in her eyes. So, you're not mad about the money? I'm mad about the lying, I clarified. I'm mad about being used as the family cautionary tale while funding the very lifestyle Dad was praising you for. The money was my choice to give, but the deception wasn't okay. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than I had ever heard it. Emma, I would like to learn more about your art business. Not to criticize or suggest changes, but because I clearly don't understand what you've accomplished and I want to. For the first time all evening, I smiled. For weeks later, I sat in my art studio, watching my bank account grow instead of shrink by $4,000. The money I had been sending to Sophia was now being invested into new digital art equipment and software, and the results were already amazing. Sophia had moved into a cramped studio apartment 20 minutes from her yoga studio. She had sold most of her designer clothes and expensive accessories to pay down her credit cards. And I had heard through Marcus that she was teaching extra classes to make ends meet. The most rewarding part wasn't watching Sophia's struggle with reality. It was watching Marcus come to terms with how completely wrong he had been about both of us. He had started calling me every few days since our barbecue confrontation, asking detailed questions about my art business operations. Not critical questions or suggestions for changes, but genuine interest in how I had built something successful while he was treating it like a waste of time. I told David about your real income numbers, he admitted during one of our calls. He laughed at me for a full hour. Uncle David always knew you were underestimating me, I replied. He said he tried to tell me multiple times, but I wouldn't listen. Marcus's voice carried deep regret. He said I was being a stubborn fool who couldn't see success because it didn't match what I expected. That sounded exactly like something David would say. He had never been shy about calling out family members when they were being ridiculous. The hardest part, Marcus continued, is realizing how many people I told that Sophia was the responsible one and you needed to get serious about your future. I was bragging about her wellness empire to everyone. And now I have to figure out how to explain that everything I said was wrong. That the daughter I was criticizing was actually more successful than I ever imagined. And the daughter I was praising was living in a fantasy funded by her sister's kindness. The reversal was complete. Marcus's entire understanding of his daughters had been flipped upside down, and he was struggling to reconcile his assumptions with reality. The most dramatic consequence came when Sophia's carefully built social media presence began to fall apart. She had grown a huge following by posting photos of her luxury lifestyle, her expensive yoga gear, and her fancy apartment. Her social media fed the story that she was a successful wellness entrepreneur living her dream life. Without my financial support, that content disappeared immediately. She could no longer afford the designer workout clothes that had been central to her online brand. Her luxury apartment was gone, replaced by a tiny space that didn't look good in photos. Her expensive smoothie bowls and boutique fitness classes became memories. Her followers began to notice. Comments on her posts shifted from praise to concern. Where did you go? Are you doing okay? Your posts have really changed. Sophia tried to keep up the act for a few weeks, posting old photos and reusing previous content, but eventually people started asking direct questions about her apparent lifestyle downgrade. The final blow came when one of her yoga students, someone she had probably bragged to about her business success, commented publicly asking about the wellness retreat she had promised to organize but never mentioned again. Sophia's social media presence, which had been built entirely on the lie of her financial success, became impossible to maintain once the truth was revealed. She eventually deleted most of her posts and stopped sharing altogether. Meanwhile, Marcus had begun telling people the truth about my art business success. It was awkward for him, having to explain that he had been wrong about both of his daughters for years. But he seemed committed to making up for his mistakes by giving me the recognition I had earned. "I'm proud of what you built," he told me during one of our conversations. "I'm ashamed that I couldn't see it when it was right in front of me." Those words meant more to me than all the money I had ever made. Sophia's return to reality proved more difficult than anyone expected. Within 8 months of losing my financial support, she had been forced to move back in with a roommate, unable to manage the debt she had accumulated while living far beyond her means. The luxury apartment, designer wardrobe, and expensive car were all gone, leaving her with barely enough furniture for her shared living space. Her social media followers, who had admired her seemingly perfect wellness lifestyle, began to unfollow once they realized her success had been completely fake. Former friends stopped including her in expensive activities she could no longer afford, and dating became complicated when potential partners expected the wealthy entrepreneur her online presence had portrayed. Marcus faced his own social embarrassment when family members and neighbors learned that he had spent years criticizing his actually successful daughter while praising the one who had been living on borrowed money and borrowed time, forcing him to confront not only his favoritism, but also his fundamental misunderstanding of what real achievement looks like versus mere appearance. As I reinvested the recovered $4,000 monthly into expanding Dreamscape Designs into new markets and premium services, I realized that Marcus's years of dismissive comments had accidentally become the fuel for my determination to prove that success comes in many forms, not just the traditional paths he understood and valued. The greatest victory wasn't watching Sophia face the consequences of her deception, but rather witnessing Marcus finally recognize and respect the artistic empire I had built while he was looking the other way, teaching me that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply allowing the truth to shine brighter than the lies that once defined you.